What's going on? Welcome to another episode of the Behind the Wheel podcast. You know, we do this whole thing every Wednesday. I'm Scott from Koenig, Jared from Koenig. We got some pretty big guests here. This is a big guest. Big guest. If you are a longtime viewer of the podcast, you'll know this person. You may have heard me refer to him as the godfather of editorial drift reporting. You may know him as the editor-in-chief or former editor-in-chief of Wrecked Magazine, and one hell of a nice guy, reigning from Texas, Joey Redmond. Joey, what's going on? Welcome.
I did forget my cowboy hat today, unfortunately,
Yes.
but yes, I'm here. I'm a little offended that I'm a big guest. I mean, I understand I could be a little skinnier, but I don't know if I appreciate that.
Right.
But hey, we're here. I also do some editorial on formuladrift.com these
That's
days.
right.
And
That's
I'm
right.
really excited to talk about Irwindale.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring that up. Before we get into Irwindale, we should talk about the big things, the really big things that you do. Everything's bigger in Texas, but the big things you do for formuladrift.com. Joey is the editor, one of the editors for formuladrift.com, and he writes the 10 things that you need to know about the event after each event, and it goes live on formuladrift.com. So you should check that out. He's been doing that for a few years now, and that's why he's so relevant to today's conversation. Today, we talk about some of the things that are going on with the season, some recap stuff. We're going to talk about the point position. We're going to talk about kind of how Joey feels about a bunch of personal things that you probably need to know. Let's talk about this championship lineup. We're talking about 5 guys. Okay. I want to make sure I don't miss it. I'm going to give points. Jared has been so graciously printed this thing out.
Well, that was Luis. Yeah, I did nothing.
Excellent. In 5th, Vaughn Gittin Jr., 474. Odie is in 4th, 514. Matt Field is 537 in 3rd. Chelsea Denofa in 2nd, 538, which is basically 19 points out of 1st, and Frederick Osbo, 557. So what we're looking at there, just kind of like you pointed out before, is that mathematically we really do have a potential 5 different outcomes. I think that Vaughn's a little low in the points for that to really succumb. So I think that you're down to 4. I think really we're talking about 3 people, right? Mm-hmm. But we've seen weird stuff. So what is your take on? Let's do it 2 ways. First way. What do you think are the potentials, and then where do you hope? How do you hope this plays out?
I mean, I hope Ryan Turek wins, who didn't even make your list. The disrespect for my poor man Ryan Turek over here. He's in 6th place.
He's 6th in the points. Yeah.
At 470, but it's only 87 points behind. So I mean, if we're considering Vaughn, I mean, Turek's only 4 points behind him. I want Ryan Turek to win the championship just because that would be the most unprobable and exciting outcome, because basically that means Frederick Osbo, Chelsea Denofa, Matt Field, and Odie Bachis would not qualify. And then Ryan would have to win the event. I don't even think he'd get 2nd. So, I want Ryan to beat Vaughn in the finals, where whoever wins would become champion. That's what I hope for.
So I like what you did there, where I asked you for a realistic scenario. And you basically just decided to say, well, if fairies come down from the heavens and then pick Ryan Turek up and then knock everybody else over and get rid of all the tires. I was kind of looking for a little bit more than that. But I mean, all right. So you hope that Ryan Turek wins. Noted.
You asked me what I hoped for. Yeah. Listen,
okay.
If we had this conversation before,
and
I hope for a golden.
If we had this conversation before the Kevin Lawrence battle, or that event, you would have mocked me the exact same way. So I just would like to point that out.
I mean, all
yes,
right.
Come on.
Okay, but with all due respect, we're talking about. You said they didn't have to qualify.
Yeah, well, if they qualify, he's eliminated.
You took the top 5 in Formula Drift, and you said if
Hey.
they just don't qualify to a field that is less than 32.
Okay, listen, guy, listen. But if two incompletes and they're out, so
Okay,
it's high
all right.
stakes here.
Yeah, well, listen, you better have a jumping cone at the chicane because that's the only thing I can think of.
Okay. So statistically speaking, we're probably looking at Osbo, Denofa, and Field. They're close enough that really it's going to be. I don't think there's any scenario where basically if one of them advances beyond any part of the event and the other two do not, that person is basically champion. So
Yeah.
it is relatively high stakes. So if all three of them make it into top 32, which I think is unlikely, but if they all happen to qualify and then two of them lose, one of them is now champion. And that's it basically just goes on down the list. I think, sorry, what I would like to see most is it come down to two of them in the finals.
Right.
And then just, I think everyone wants to see, you be able to compete for the championship. Now, the interesting dynamic there is if two of them meet earlier in the event, then technically that would be a championship. Like if one of them goes out early and we have two of them left, I think that's the most interesting thing about the points being this close together is there's a high likelihood that two of them are going to battle.
Right.
And that could very well be a battle for the championship, which I think would be amazing.
But we've seen a lot of messed up things happen just by the draw, right? We've seen, top 32 battles turn into a place where now some of these guys either get knocked out or face each other earlier, and then it clears the path for somebody else. And that is a statistical thing that could happen for a few people.
It's a realistic scenario, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's happened before.
Well, so the one comment that I just want to quickly make, and I want to see how you feel about this, is, I did my own research real quick, and Denofa is the only one that's podiumed 3 times this season out of the now what will be, what is it, 6 rounds, 7 rounds? I forget.
Well, it's
so
it's 8 out of 7 rounds so far.
How do you think that plays into the whole possibility of him taking the championship? Does that have any implications?
Oh, you mean Chelsea's won 3 events?
This year, yeah. He's podium. He's gotten first at 3 events.
Right. Yeah.
And
because I think Oslo technically has. Oslo's got 3 second places. Yeah, and 1 first place because Oslo podiumed in Orlando, Erie, Long Beach, and then he won St. Louis.
Yeah, I personally don't think
you can fact check me.
Yeah, I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think that
I was just curious.
I know, but my opinion is only, is just that I think that makes, it may make a difference if it was somebody that mentally needed the momentum, right?
Well, how about this? Chelsea Denofa and Frederick Osbo have met in the finals twice this year.
Okay.
And Chelsea Denofa's won both times.
It's interesting,
okay,
but that means that we got to get to a point where they would have to battle to make a difference.
Yes, but just if you think about it, Orlando, the final was Denofa Osbo. Denofa won. The final in Lake Erie was Denofa Osbo. And
yeah.
Granted, if I remember correctly, Osbo didn't make it to the line in Lake Erie or had a car issue, or there was something funky about that victory. I think he never made it to the line. He didn't fix his car in 5 minutes, but they've met twice in final battles and they're 2-0. So Chelsea's 2-0. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that those two meet in the finals, but then I'd also love for them to meet in top 32.
Yeah.
Real, spice it up.
Yeah. It's interesting. What's interesting too is that you have a lot of drivers that could clearly you have a lot of drivers that are going to be in that top 32 that are clearly able to cause a pretty good upset. You know what I mean? Like, you have Chris Forsberg, and interesting enough, man, Dylan Hughes is really progressing himself as being like one of the longevity drivers. I think he's really impressive as a driver, and I think it's interesting to see that even not that it's much, but he's even leading Chris Forsberg, his own teammate, on the same, in basically similar,
They're 6 points apart.
Yeah, but so what I'm saying is like, you have some of these guys scattered through top 32 that are as every bit capable as some of these guys in the championship fight. So there could be some upsets even along the way that can change this. This really is setting up to be a potentially incredible round.
I think so. Even when it seems like it's not set up that way, that was kind of what I was saying. Like, Irwindale just seems to deliver, just create drama where you think, drama does not exist. There's been a lot of drivers this year that I think have filled the gaps in the potential of, I guess drivers that have left. I mean, if I would have told you that Jeff Jones, looks like a potential winner anytime he meets a top 5 driver, I mean, I'd be laughed at. I mean, Travis Reeder is knocking on the door of finishing in the top 10. I mean, he's tied right now theoretically he's just short, right, of Essa. Essa and Taguchi, I think, are tied in ninth.
Yeah.
375. So, I mean, Reeder is very possibly going to be a top 10 driver this year. Jeff Jones with a good performance at Irwindale could be a top 10 driver. I mean, Taguchi, who's a guy, honestly, I haven't really talked about very much in my top 10s and other things. I mean, he's quietly done really well. I mean, he's had some poor spells here and there. But
I feel like I owe Taguchi an apology. I was a little rough on him
Do you?
years ago. I think so. I was a little rough on him years ago. That first stint with the GTR was just flat out all over the place. But I really feel that, like,
the red one, right? Was it the
Jerry
the
Yang
top
car?
one
I don't
oil
remember.
or something like
Yeah.
So,
The red GTR top oil.
But, like, if you remember, there was times where, like, I didn't even know if he was, like, if they told him where the track was. Like, he was off. No, because we've had this plenty of times. He had a really rough go in the beginning.
I mean, that car seemed pretty poorly set up one way, whether it was for him or his understanding. I mean, there was definitely some issue beyond, I think, his capabilities, which is clear now. Right?
But he, and this was a Formula Drift Japan champion, right? He won Formula Drift Japan. So, like, this is a driver that came over here and for the past, 4 years now, right? Does that sound right?
I think so. Yeah.
Has put in the groundwork and progressed every single year, and now has really put himself together as a extremely competitive driver. So, for those people that maybe, like, he fell off your radar in your background for the first few years, and you really just looked at him as somebody else that was coming over from overseas, he really has cemented his place and position within FD. So, it's interesting to see.
And I was going to say, he was at my garage a few months ago, so you could have apologized to him in person.
Was he wrenching in the Baja?
Huh?
Was he wrenching in the Baja?
No. He was actually terrified of that thing. But
I can
anyway,
understand.
You could have apologized to him in person, is what I'm saying.
I understand. Well, that's very nice of you. So yeah, I mean, I just think that the potential for upsets are riddled, and like you pointed out, that's probably why Irwindale, being the last round, gets so much controversy, drama, etc., especially going into that last round.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about another driver who's nowhere near the top 10, but I think Dai Yoshihara is another interesting element. Going into Irwindale, if you haven't seen, he announced his retirement. He's one of the
original OGs.
He's one of the 3 drivers that have been to every Formula Drift event since the inception. Chris Forsberg and Kangushi being the other two,
Yeah.
as far as I remember. I'm double checking this real quick. Let's see.
I think
yeah,
you're right. I also
that's
think
right. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, besides 18 years he's been competing in Formula Drift.
No, I'm just
Oh.
talking about.
I thought there's another
No.
another podcast going on.
No.
But Dai is one of those drivers, maybe similarly to the effect of like a Tyler Mcquarrie and stuff, that will probably go on to have a real race career in other motorsports. You know, we saw him playing with Pikes Peak this year. You know, he's done some other events. He's done some other driving. And I think it makes sense that you know, maybe this is the time he kind of starts that path, you know?
Funny you mentioned Tyler McQuarrie.
Thank you very much. Why is this funny?
Tyler McQuarrie
Don't say
won his last ever race in Formula Drift, his career at Irwindale Speedway.
That is interesting. And he's a good guy too.
He is. He actually races for the guys that have the shop next door to my warehouse. Funny enough.
Oh, is that
But
right?
Tyler McQuarrie only has 2 career wins in 2011 Irwindale. His last ever ride was a victory.
Well, you know what they say.
So
If you're gonna go out with a
yeah.
In the Camaro, right?
Yeah, he finished up in the Camaro.
No, did he?
Yeah,
You
he
guys,
finished
are
up in
you
the
sure
Camaro.
about this? I thought it was like a Z.
No, that was
No.
Pat Mordaunt was driving that Z. Remember?
The Falcon Z?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guys, I don't know.
Pat
I'll take your
Mordaunt.
word for it.
You should, because
2011 is a big blind spot.
Yeah.
It's because he was driving an ASD car. I didn't think it was a Camaro.
Wait, why are you saying 2011?
Because it was 2011.
2011 is when Tyler was done? No.
I have footage of him
You
from
sure?
2014.
Yeah, it was way later than that.
Oh
Wasn't he in
my
like
gosh,
16?
guys, listen.
This is
Maybe 2011. This is fake news. Okay. I think 2011 was his last year with Falcon, perhaps. Maybe that is what I was thinking.
That feels better.
I think he
because-
left. I think he left Falcon.
Right.
He left Falcon after he won that race. I think
Right.
that is what happened.
Because
Yes.
the Falcon 350Z ended up being piloted in 2016 by Pat Mordaunt. And then Mordaunt,
Really?
yeah.
Yes.
And then Mordaunt ran
That poor car.
Mordaunt ran 16, and I think that's when he bowed out and said he was done. And then
Got it.
Tyler, I think that was Tyler's last year. I think if we're going to go back and look,
Man.
Tyler's last year was 2016, and it would be in that Camaro, if I remember.
You're probably correct. I remember he was like, I remember talking to him after he won, and he was like half joking with me. He's like, oh man, he's like, I'm fired anyway, even though I won. I should have just wrecked this thing. And I was like, yeah, probably.
Oh man, that's great. So
I think it's been long enough we can say that on there. But yeah, that was just a very
he should be
memorable
okay.
moment in my FD life. But I agree. He's very missed. And anyway, maybe Dai Yoshihara can win his last Falcon driving event as well.
yeah, that would be cool. I think Dai's a good guy, and I think he's good for the sport. So we'll see what
He will be missed.
we'll
for
see
sure.
where he ends up in. Did you watch any of his Pikes Peak stuff?
No.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think it's interesting that there's a little documentary on Motor Trend. If I don't remember if you have to pay the $9.99 or whatever they have going on there. They're not sure yet. They're working it out.
I have more questions than answers about that thing, but it's maybe a whole nother podcast.
I understand. It's valid. I'm not sure. Yeah. So anyhow, moving on. It's an interesting setup. So where do you think? Let's cement this. Where do you think? Let's do the Joey Redmond predictions. In fact, we'll go around the room here. How do we see this? How do we see this ending up? Yep, that's right.
Are we doing? Are we
Not
doing
what you
how
want.
do we see
not
it
what no.
ending
Listen,
up or
not,
what we want?
No, not what we want. We
You
heard
already
what
said
you
what
want.
you
want a
want.
bunch of fictitious crap that's not going to ever happen. Let's talk about the stuff that could happen. I want to talk about how is this going to play out? What's your call? Like real fantasy Formula Drift style.
I personally, I really want Field or Denofa to win, just as like a new thing. I just find myself really, I find it impossible to bet against Steph Papadakis and Frederick
Yeah,
Osman.
that is
They're just
that
too.
is the equation.
Yeah, because it's like Frederick Osmo could blow his motor in the final four
Again.
battle
Steph
and
would put it back together
somehow
with a stick of
win.
chewing gum
Yeah,
and like a paper
that's what I
clip.
mean.
He like
It's like every time I'm like, man, these guys are effed. Like it's over, and then they come back, and it's like not only does the car work, it's like competitive. Like I don't I don't understand how you can swap a motor in 4.5 minutes that runs. I mean, I couldn't swap a motor in 4.5 months in my garage.
Honestly, Stefan Papadakis is easily one of the, I mean, prolific pieces of the sport. Like,
Agreed.
he's just I mean, and dude, mechanically minded is incredible. He's I think it's interesting to go back and look at some of the effect that, kind of the earlier days with him and Sean Carlson, have on how some of the decisions in sport and skill sets and different things evolved. But without getting too far into that rabbit hole, yeah, I agree. That is a tough horse to bet against.
Yeah, like I think Denofa's team, and with as many team members as Vaughn has, I don't really worry about something breaking on that car either. I just, Denofa always there's just that itching feeling in the back of my neck where I'm like, he could always go a little too Denofa,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
I mean,
so it's like
yeah.
that's there, and so it's like that makes me hard to really bet the farm on him. And then with Matt Field, I want it for him. I feel like he's done so much to prepare, but I think no offense to Matt, and I think he has a great team as well. But like when I look at like what Matt Field has at the race versus what Vaughn Gittin Jr. Motorsports and what Papadakis bring, I just don't think they're equal.
Yeah.
And just the fact that, I mean, let's I don't want to disparage anyone or look at anything in that nature, but like St. Louis, I think, was a perfect example where Matt Field broke his e-brake, and then he left his pit to go try and figure out a way to fix his e-brake. Where I'm like, well, Steph Papadakis would have like 19 of them. He'd like pull it off his F350 or whatever they tow in, his Toyota Tundra, and like they'd have an e-brake. So I think Matt Field has one of the top 5 crews in Formula Drift. You can't have a poor crew and be in third place, right? That's not statistically possible. I just think Steph Papadakis and Von Gittin Jr. Motorsports have the top 2 crews, and Matt is like somewhere behind there in a noticeable amount. So it's like, even though I think Matt has the driving ability in this high pressure situation with all these things going on, I feel like they don't have as many bodies as the Papadakis team or the Vaughn team. And it's like, if something really goes south on that car, do I think they could fix it in 5 minutes? And I don't know. Whereas I feel way more confident about Chelsea and Osmo.
Well, and I think another thing to think about is just, let's go a little more mechanical. And I may be a little bit off. I'm not super intimate with Matt Field's, vehicle layout or anything like that. But, look, the one thing about that vet is the fact that I believe they're still running a torque tube. Now, people that are familiar with Corvettes will know what I mean. The torque tube is a freaking nightmare. And the reason that makes so much difference is when you speak about somebody at Papadakis, yes, there's the advantageous preparation that Steph and his team do and all the experience they have in doing that and preparing for the worst case. But the one thing that we're not really even talking about is what happens months before the season ever starts. And they build a new platform. That they have figured out how to, and this is the mechanical genius that is Steph Papadakis, is that they figured out how to take this car apart 7 ways from Sunday and get it out easier, and he'll move bolts to the right angles and make everything so it can just, come
it's
apart.
like Legos
yeah.
with him.
So that's different, and I guarantee you that if you were to put the Supra, next to Matt Field's that you would look mechanically, if you would just go down a list of like, all right, can we change the engine in this much time? Like, I just think that you're going to see that the Papadakis Supra is just, yeah, we could do that. And Matt Field's going to be like, we could do that. Oh, we can't do that. Just because of the nature of how difficult it is to work on a car in a short amount of time. But that's my opinion.
I think Jared's up. So what is your?
Oh, I didn't even say my thing.
What,
I was just talking about.
Yeah, you didn't say your thing. Like,
what's
your
thing?
What's your thing?
Who's gonna win?
I did. I'm Frederick Osbo. I said I find it hard to not bet for Frederick Osbo.
So that's what you meant by when you said that. I thought you were still gonna come in with a.
No, that's it. To me, I think they're gonna finish the exact way they are right now in the championship. The only way I see someone, how about this? The only way I see Osbo not winning is if one of those two drivers gets a chance to beat him earlier in the event. Like if Osbo and Field go in 16 and Field can outdrive him in that certain case, I think Osbo can be beat by both of them heads up. I mean, like I said, Denofa's beat him twice this year. It's been proven.
Yeah.
If it doesn't come to a heads up situation, I just think the preparation, the strategy, the knowledge, the experience of the Osbo Papadakis combo can't be beat. So for Osbo to lose, he's got to lose heads up to Denofa or Field earlier in the event.
Wow. Okay. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, so I think my call here, if we're playing fantasy formula drift, I think that the top 4 all make it to top 8. Right, so now we're looking at whatever. I think Odie goes out in top 8. I think Matt Field goes out in top 8.
Really?
And wow. Yeah, and I'm thinking that Chelsea and Frederick both make it into the top 4. Man, I want Chelsea to win, but I agree. I think Frederick is gonna win, but I want Chelsea to win. What I would like to happen is that Chelsea wins, but Chelsea has this thing, like sometimes he just gets on he turns it on, man. He turns it on so violently that it's like 180-degree entrances. I mean, just
oh my god,
I'm nervous how that whole thing is gonna play out with him being super amped up and right there on the door of a championship.
I think qualifying.
No,
I think qualifying will be a big hint as to how Chelsea's going to do this weekend. Just something to consider.
You don't think that in qualifying his first run is going to look like
a reverse entry,
like something from Nitro Circus?
How about this though? He qualified first in Orlando and won and beat Osbo. So like I just think you're gonna see. I think everyone doesn't doubt Chelsea Denofa's ability. I think everyone is questioning his mentality and his ability to hold it together.
Yeah.
I think qualifying will be a big indicator of what you're gonna see Saturday. I think if Chelsea Denofa shows up, qualifies first, second, third, fourth, he's in that top crust of the event. Especially, I mean, you got to consider how big of a deal it is if one of these guys earns a bye. Let's say there's only 30 drivers. If you need to win every battle that these guys aren't winning, not running a battle, not competing in a battle is huge. So normally I really do not like Formula Drift qualifying. I've never been a fan of qualifying. 10 years I was head editor at Rec Magazine. I never was excited about qualifying. I kind of poo-pooed it most of the time. But I think the new format has improved qualifying. At least it's less runs. But I will say, I think qualifying at this event with these three drivers being so close and just how it fills the bracket out is almost bigger than the event itself, because there's a chance that all three of these guys get in the same corner of the bracket
Yeah.
where they
have to
meet
beat
in
each
top
other up.
32 and then top 16 is the championship, right? I mean, it's possible.
Right.
Frederick Osbo meets Denofa in top 32. Let's say Denofa wins, and now boom, top 16. He's going against Matt Field for essentially what could be the event, unless Odie just really pushes strong. So I think the riskiest thing you could do if you're one of those three drivers is do a poor qualifying and stick yourself in that 16th to 21st or 12th, and then all of a sudden, hey, you qualified 12th, you feel good about it, but bam, Justin Pollock is now on your door for top 32, or
Yeah.
a driver who's pretty good in tandem that's not in qualifying, like a Jeff Jones now is facing you, versus either that buy run or getting one of these lower ranked, drivers that are not as threatening, I guess, to start off the event.
And don't have anything to really lose. They have that throw it all out there ability just to push it out there and say, oh, I don't care. I'll just if I wreck, I wreck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that taking a line from Batman, Chelsea Denofa, even if he's not the champion you want, I think he's the champion we need.
Oh God.
Wow.
Well, I'll just throw in my 2 cents real quick and say that I'm going to be a bit of the black sheep here and say that I think Denofa is going to take it, and here's why. Yes, Frederick Osbo is a champion. There's no question about it. He's an amazing driver. Chelsea, we've clearly stated, has the skills. He's a great driver. The one factor that I think is going to benefit him the most is the fact that his teammate, Vaughn Gittin Jr., is also a champion. And I think sort of having somebody as like your mentor, or, your cheerleader, whatever you want to call it, I just think somehow he's going to be able to like chill out and figure out how to get it done. I think if I had to guess, I think Vaughn and him have been having a lot of pep talks in this week leading up to this weekend. I think he might be able to pull it off. I don't know why.
I generally, from my limited knowledge of personalities, I think I would disagree with those pep talks happening.
Well, there's a shocker.
But I don't know. Joey probably would be best to really comment on it. I think that you got a few things that have to.
Legitimately good friends.
But for this to really happen in the way that you're describing, I think a couple things have to happen. Vaughn needs to go out pretty early,
which we've seen happen.
Oh, I'm not saying it
once.
couldn't happen. I'm just saying that until he's, and then I think, Anyhow, Joey, what are your thoughts on that whole opinion?
Well, I mean, I think we should consider that Vaughn Gittin Jr. Just won an Ultra 4 championship this past weekend.
Right.
So he's been a little busy. I do think there is something to that. I think the nice thing is that most of Chelsea Denofa's team has probably won a championship. Like the guys working on his car and all everything are familiar with the occasion, which I do agree is pretty helpful. But that's the thing is, like, I think all things equal, if we were racing in a, if they were all robots and they were racing on purely their ability, I think Chelsea Denofa wins. I don't know if there's really any question there.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's the problem is it's I don't think anyone is questioning Chelsea's ability on the track, or like his to me it's just that it's going to be those, can he rein in those split second decisions that you're making in a battle. And he's proven this year that, I mean, look, he's in second place. He's done really well, I think. But I mean, man, that like look at the in-car video from the Long Beach crash between him and Vaughn. He tapped his brake for 16th of a second. I mean, he literally, I can tell what he was doing. He felt like he was going too deep in the wall, and so he just tried to angle his car, right, for you live people. He tried to like rotate the back out. Fucking Junior bowled into him like he was parked and standing still. And then
yeah.
It's interesting though when you watch the in-car footage, like when you watch it from the live stream, you're like, oh, Vaughn was like really making a meal of that, or like, what's the deal? But then when you watch the in-car video that those guys released on Instagram, I mean, Vaughn is literally, it's like they come out of Outer Bank 2, and they're going to the far wall, and it's like Vaughn just sees smoke, Chelsea Denova. I mean, it's just it's so crazy how these decisions that they make in these milliseconds of driving and how much the tandem drivers are driving blind, and it's like there's just so much at stake that you're just literally talking about a milliseconds decision. I mean, I think if Chelsea didn't pull the e-brake, there's obviously a chance he wouldn't have made it out of that wall, and he didn't think that he could. But if he doesn't pull that e-brake and then he rolls through the rest of the track, I mean, he could be going into this event in first place instead of Frederick Osmo very easily, then, right? So that's what I mean. It's you're just talking about margins that are so small that I think Jared has a point. I mean, there is something to Vaughn and his team having won a championship very recently last year, and that was under even more stressful conditions, I think, with double events. I mean, gosh, that 2 Irwindales in 2 days is just
that's intense. Yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah, it's something to wrap your head around. So, and I think Frederick Osmo's team hasn't seen much turnover either. So a lot of those guys have had championship experience. So Matt Field's kind of the guy on the outside, but I mean, if the other teams are looking at that too, maybe we and the other teams are ignorantly under considering the capabilities of Matt Field or even Matt Field or even Odie Botchus.
Yeah.
There are days when you watch Odie drive where it's like this guy he can't lose.
I think he cracks under pressure too much.
Well, and I think that you also run into that issue where there is a perfect setup here, which is that it's not impossible for Chelsea and Osbo to possibly go out in the top 16 or something like that and watch those other drivers win their battles. I mean, there could be a combination of things. We just don't know. I mean, that's the upset. Does Matt Field, make it all the way to the top 4 when other guys, 2 other guys, get dismissed in the top 16, in the top 16. It's possible. It's happened before, it just takes a couple different changes in the layout there, and all of a sudden it's different.
Yeah.
So.
No, yeah, it's definitely anyone's game, and like I said, Irwindale is unpredictable at best.
So before we wrap up, I just want to quickly touch on ProSpec. One question to you. ProSpec had some fairly decent rule changes at the beginning. I think they're trying to make ProSpec a series that will stand on a latitude level rather than a feeder series type of level. I don't know if they're going to be successful with that, but it's interesting to watch. We've seen some drivers really move into Pro from Pro 2 in the past few years. What do you feel about ProSpec as a series? How do you feel about the driver quality for ProSpec? And where do you think this series will potentially end up over the next 2 to 3 years?
I think the best thing they did was get rid of the name Pro 2. I think that really hung up a lot of drivers in not wanting to be in the series. I don't know. I struggle with ProSpec. I wish they would bring it to more rounds. I think there's a lot of work to do there. I think they're doing their best. You have to understand it's Formula Drift is still relatively new, right, compared to most motorsports in America. And I think they're working on it. I think what I would really like to see is more drivers being invited and almost doing like a East Coast series, West Coast series where it was like split to limit travel for some of these drivers. So where like, there'd be a Orlando, English Town, Atlanta, like East region, and there'd be like a St. Louis, Seattle, LA, West Coast, or however it played out.
You're talking about like baseball, like American versus National League type thing.
Kind of, and then I think what you would do is you'd take like the top 6 drivers from each region and let them battle it out at Irwindale, right? And like, or take top 8 from each region, so you got a top 16. I just think it would help. You know, I think the biggest barrier to getting drivers into pro spec is the costs of traveling. Every time I talk to a team, whether it's Chris Forsberg or it's Nick Novak or whoever I'm talking to, the number one expense that every team says they have that you underestimate almost every season is travel. You know, these guys are going to the West Coast, and diesel is $4 plus in a lot of these states in the West Coast. And you're driving something that's getting 6 miles to the gallon to haul your race car to Irwindale. And if you're a guy like Nick Novak, who's based, the Courier Works is based in Atlanta. I mean, that's a 2,100 mile trip, 2 ways, 4,200 miles. And I mean, St. Louis is not a small drive. I mean, when Reeder was doing Pro 2, I mean, being based in Seattle, he was, driving to Orlando and then home and then Englishtown and then home. It's a lot of expense, man. And you start flying, you're flying a spotter in, a mechanic, second, third mechanic. You start looking at all of these costs. They just build so fast. It's just those things you take for granted, A lot of these guys in pro spec also, aren't on tire deals. So it's like you're buying tires now. You're paying for gas. You're maintaining a hauler. You're doing all these things. You got to find someone to drive your hauler. Assuming some of these guys work right Monday to Friday. So you're racing on Saturday. You're paying some guy to now drive your hauler back and hope the thing doesn't catch on fire. Who knows all the other things you're worried about. But I think it would be interesting if they were to regionalize pro spec more, because I think what would happen is you would get more drivers in the series, and then I think you would have better talent, and then I think that East versus West final would garner more attention, right? Because everybody has their opinion where the best drivers come from. Club Loose makes the best, Formula Drift drivers. They have the most championships. Just Drift, I think, has had the most guys in Formula Drift, so they'd probably argue, they produce the most pro drivers. I think there's already that very regional or cultural element to drifting in America already. The styles are very different between East Coast and West Coast drivers. So I think if they leaned into that a little bit more, in a regional sense, and I think that would even potentially help some of these Pro-Am series garner more drivers, because there's probably a lot of guys driving in Pro-Am that know they can't afford to do pro spec, right? Or it's like, where am I going to come up with 75 grand, 100 grand, 125 grand? Where, if it was 3 events and you happen to live in North Carolina and you're only going to Orlando, Englishtown, and Atlanta, all of a sudden it's like, I could maybe do this for 28, 30 grand, assuming my car doesn't break. It's interesting. I think that I think there's just a potential to maybe bring up some more drivers and grow the sport that way.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting take, and I think it's an interesting piece to think about. Kind of setting it up so that there's almost the World Series of drift for that level. So that is interesting. Well, I don't know, man. I think I'm excited to see what happens this weekend. I know that I'm
nervous.
Well, I'm not nervous. I don't have any skin in the game. I just gotta sit there and watch.
It's a nervous excitement.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm interested. I'm curious. This is I feel like I'm like this every Irwindale though. It's every year. It's not this year or next year. It's just the fact. But I almost like that Chelsea De Nova is my underdog, which weird to say.
Right.
You know what I mean? Weird to say, but he is. He's my underdog, and I really hope he crushes it.
I agree. I can't wait to watch Formula Drift Irwindale from a hotel after going to Formula One qualifying. It's gonna be very exciting.
I'm pretty jealous. That seems like a cool trip.
Yes. Well, it is only a 3.5 hour drive.
I understand.
But,
Are you you're gonna try to give Lewis Hamilton a hug, or how's that gonna work?
Sure. I mean, if Lewis reaches out for a hug, I'm not going to turn him away.
I
But
understand.
Well,
I just wanted to know what the
I
scenario.
think the only F1 driver I wouldn't hug would be Mazepin. Just that guy. Who knows?
I don't
Send me
watch
into a
F1.
wall with a hug.
Yeah, I don't watch F1 enough to be able to comment with any wit on this end.
Got it.
I understand.
He's in 20th place out of 20. A far 20th place, I would
Right.
argue. Actually, I don't even know if he's in 20th, but every F1 meme about being terrible is tied to him. So.
Well, that's a career-ending social media. So, all right.
Yes,
Well, listen.
thank God social media is only on the internet, right?
yeah. Before that, we used to have to make fun of each other in person.
I know. How embarrassing was that for everyone? He is technically not in last, but he's in 20th out of 21 because I guess there was a sub driver. So anyway, he's not the best. I'd probably still give him a hug. Okay. I'm excited. I love Formula One. This has been the best Formula One season in a long time.
Right.
Maybe 8 years, 7 years. I mean, this is like the best F1 season since like the Ross Brawn days, which has been, it's a long time ago. So it's exciting that I'm going to Circuit of the America for the first time, not really knowing who's going to win the race.
Yeah.
How about that?
I'll give you that. And
every other year, I've been pretty confident.
And that's a great venue to go to any race. So,
yep.
Hey, not bad. Well, you let us know how it works out. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll see how this works out. Maybe we'll touch upon the results in a future little roundabout. We'll see. So
I'm excited.
Well, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. It's nice. It felt very homey. It felt very like we've done this before.
I did. It was very much like old times.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, felt good. So anyhow, with that, we're gonna start to get out of here. For everybody watching, don't forget we have a piece of content coming out on Friday. Also, don't forget Formula Drift. It's this weekend. So watch the live stream, and then you can comment and see how wrong we are afterward. Aside from that, that's pretty much it. We will take care. We'll see you next week. We'll do this whole thing again. If the live seems to went successful, which it seems like it is, we'll be back live, I think, next week. Take care of yourself. We'll catch you later.